Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face, my card making space, and some cards using the August 2024 release from Altenew. Many products, including Cardstock. I'm impressed. I'm going to use a bunch of the new Cardstock, the mushroom die set. People were tagging me when it was sneak peeked a couple weeks ago, whenever it was. Of course I signed up for that one. Love it. Love it. So I'm going to do a bunch of die cutting and show a way to kind of step it up. We're going to use my Better Press just as a little like kind of add-on background and all the things. As always, I'll post a link to the new release in the description box below the video so you can check it all out because there's inks and cardstock and stamps and dies and all the fun, fabulous things. And then, of course, I'll have links to everything I used. Those will also be in the description box below the video. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links, end up placing an order, I get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. It's what helps pay the bills, keep the channel going. And also, if you don't already follow me on Instagram, highly recommend it. That's just where I post the cards I make. So if you're curious about when a new video's up, it'll be on my Instagram. I'll have a link like I always do. All my socials are linked directly below as well. This one is part of a hop for this release, so there's like giveaways and stuff, so highly recommend checking it out. Plus tons of amazing inspiration because there are some just phenomenal makers that work with Altenew products. So that's all the housekeeping. Let's get into making the cards. So first off, a look at the new cardstocks. Many beautiful colors. Knowing Altenew, there's probably going to be many colors. All of these ones so far are the same as their fresh dye ink colors. So my assumption is that there will be many more. Oh, I don't even know how many inks they have. So many colors. Anyway, it's 8.5 by 11 sheets and they are 80-pound weight cardstock, which I'm actually kind of happy about. I personally don't use 80-pound cardstock as like card bases. I find I prefer like 120-pound, like really heavyweight cardstock. But I like this weight, like 65 to 80-pound cardstocks for all of the layering die cuts. Because nowadays we've got, a bajillion wafer die sets and all the layers. And it's kind of nice having pretty colors of cardstock to layer that isn't super heavyweight, because some of these layers, when you end up getting like 6, 7 layers, it gets to be a lot. So I was actually really happy with this. And then these littler packs I'm showing, these have been out for a while. I've purchased packs of these. These are kind of like smaller little like sampler sizes in a sense, which is nice. Also, again, for die cutting and things. So I was kind of flipping through because I was trying to find like what colors I wanted to use for the mushrooms. This is the Mushroom Cottage layering die set, which, yeah, of course I had to get it. It's adorable. So I had picked out all my colors and I did all my die cutting. Did all that off camera because you just die cut. And with Altenew's like layering die sets, in the packaging, there's like layering guides. It's like step-by-step instructions. They even give, color suggestions, all that sort of a thing, which I follow sometimes a little loosely. But the layering guides definitely help. Although with these, it's kind of obvious, really. The dies themselves are all clustered together. So all of the toppers, the mushroom caps, like the ones with holes, that was all one wafer die. And then the piece that goes behind it that I die cut from white cardstock, that was all one wafer die, and so on and so forth. So it makes it easy to die cut, all the colors you need, all the things. And then assembling, it all just kind of came together. But now that, I'm figuring things out, I usually have the packaging a lot of times open, like at the top of my desk, so I can just see. It's like, oh, okay, this, like, especially this little piece I'm adhering right now, I had no idea what that was at first. I was like, what is this? It's part of one of the mushrooms. It makes sense once you look at the layering guide and it's like, oh, okay, So I just went through and adhered everything. So like I always do, I did all my die cutting first. Like I had prepped all my cardstock first, which that I'll show for the second set of cards. And then did all my die cutting, laid everything out, and then adhered everything together, or at least adhered the mushrooms, the little doors and windows. I'm going to show putting them together, but I didn't adhere them till later because I hadn't made up my mind for sure if I wanted to use them. I like that you have that option. So it's like you can just make them as regular mushrooms, or you can have the little doors and make them little cottages, and it's just cute. So yeah, that wonky little piece there, that goes on this larger one to create the little roof, little mushroom cap roof. It's like a little add-on. It's so cute. Seriously, look at it. So got those assembled, and then it was the same thing with these windows. Even though some of these are pretty small little pieces, the dies themselves were, attached together for each one, which I like that, because especially if I have to do, a bunch of die cutting, it just saves me time and effort. It's like, just have to run it through once, and it die cuts, all the little frames, die cuts all the little, bases, whatever. And then with smaller pieces like this, tweezers come in super, super handy. Just makes life a little bit easier. So I assembled my little doors, and then the little window frames. Again, these ones were pretty simple. Like when I first die cut everything, I was like, I'm not sure what's going on. But then when I laid everything out, it was like, this piece obviously fits on top of this piece, which fits on top of this piece. It just, because the shapes, everything just made sense. So like I always say, if I can do it, anybody can do it. So assembled all my little pieces. And then I didn't adhere them to the mushrooms, and then I'm just going to do that when I start assembling the actual cards. So I just went through, worked my way through. Having a fine tip glue helps as well, especially with the smaller little tiny pieces. You could leave those off though if you don't want to use them or fiddle with that, but again, that didn't take very long. And then for my cards, the sentiments I used are from the new Craft Your Life project kit. It's called the Chocolate Flowers. That's not the whole kit is not part of this video. I'll probably use that in a future one because it is another lovely one. It has gorgeous floral die cuts in that one too. But I just pulled out some of the sentiments from the stamp set, and I had stamped the insides of my cards with one of the sentiments in black ink. And then I stamped those solid sentiments also with black ink onto white cardstock, and then just trimmed them out. And then this die cut is the new piped waffle die, which is just fun for, backgrounds. You could double this up and completely cover a card front with that, which would create a really fun sort of textured background. But I just die cut it from the lighter gray cardstock, which was Morning Frost, and adhered it to my card front, and then wrapped around some baker's twine because I usually need to sneak in some baker's twine here, there, elsewhere. So wrap some baker's twine around the card front, reverse tweezers as always, to hold the knot. Fiddled with the bow till I got it the way I wanted it. Then you remove the reverse tweezers, pull everything tight, and then trim off the excess of the baker's twine. And then I've got my little bow, and it just, adds that little extra something. So off camera, I had already assembled the other card. So then I just follow that. So it just makes life a little easier when I'm filming. Because usually I'm, moving things around, figuring out the layout, etc., etc. So that's another reason sometimes why it's why when I've got all the supplies out, why not make, more than one? Sometimes it's do things like this because it's I can use one as my template, figure it out. Or other times it's I've got all these die cuts or all these stamped pieces, whatever, and I can make two similar but not the exact same, things like that. So I'd already done the one, so then I was just basically kind of following it with this one and just adding in clusters of the little greenery. All of this is from that exact same mushroom cottage die set. There's all this fun greenery. So those I die cut from two different shades of the green cardstock. I used olive and bamboo. So just to kind of mix up the colors of the greenery, and then just tuck that in here and there amongst my little mushroom houses. And then the little rocks, again, from the same little die set, are also die cut from that Morning Frost cardstock, and I'd hear those just kind of along the bottom of my card front here. Some popped up with just little thin foam squares just to even things out between the layers of cardstock and whatnot. So once I've got all of that adhered into place, I'm going to flip the card over and just trim off what's hanging off the edges of the card front with my scissors. And then I'd saved one of the mushrooms to put onto the inside of the card along with one of the little pieces of greenery. And then same thing, after that was adhered, flipped it over, trimmed off the excess, and then added my stamped sentiment with some thin foam squares. And then I'm going to come back to these later. Like technically they were done, but I was like, something's missing, but I'll come back to it. So set those aside. Now working on more die cuts, this time using the Craft a Flower Dahlia April Heather. Dahlia April Heather. Yeah, that die set. And picked out some other colors of cardstock. And this is how I prep. If I'm doing, layering dies or just a bunch of die cutting, is I just make little piles. So I've got all my colors, and even if I'm doing, say, like just white cardstock, I'll still make little piles in, trimming down, or I go through my scraps, etc. And then I just work through that, die cut everything, and then I just have little piles of my die cuts, and then either I assemble them, or in this case, I'm going to step it up a little bit and add some ink blending, which just adds like texture and dimension to the die cuts. And again, you can do this with just white cardstock. I've shown that a million times as well. The nice thing about starting with a color cardstock base is a big chunk of the work's already done, which I love. So the color's already there. So now I'm just intensifying it a little bit. So with the greens, I added, because I used that was olive cardstock, but I used swamp green and oak moss on that one. And then for the flower centers, I used caramel toffee cardstock. And then I added like caramel toffee ink and then paper bag ink. And I have my die cuts stuck to an Altenew like ultra sticky grip mat. And I'm using my Altenew little mini blending brushes and Altenew fresh dye inks. And the thing to remember, because especially with these like Altenew's cardstocks, they are like matching their ink colors. And if you're going to add ink, like the same color ink to the same color cardstock, so these little like flower century bits are buttercream cardstock. So I had first added buttercream ink. You always have to remember that when it's the same color, let it dry. Because if you're going for a certain look, these inks, just like a lot of inks on the market, soften and dry back a bit. And it's one thing when you're working on white cardstock, all color is going to show up on white, obviously. But when you're already starting on a color base, if you're using like lighter colors or the same color, it'll look more intense because the ink is still wet. But then as it dries, it's going to soften back. So depending on how intense you want the color layering to be, always make sure to let it dry before you determine what you want to do, etc. I just I started with the lightest and would work my way to the darkest. So with the flowers themselves, I had used blush, rouge, and crimson cardstock. And I used that same quad of inks, including velvet, which is the darkest shade. And same thing, I worked my way from kind of lightest to darkest and ended up adding like all the shades. Well, other than I didn't add the light ones to the darkest cardstock because it wouldn't show up anyway. But just added like a light hand, just blending those inks onto all of these pieces. And it just creates so much more like depth to all of the pieces. And it's fun. So, love it. And then of course with Altenew's like keyhole die system, there are keyhole shapes, and depending on the die set and how many pieces there's sometimes different shapes. So with this set, because there's two flower shapes, there's two different keyhole shapes. So the first one is an actual like keyhole shape, plus there's numbers debossed into all of these layers. It just makes it super easy to layer them. Another thing I love that so many crafty brands behind the scenes do all the work. They do all the thinking so that when it shows up in my hands, I don't have to do as much thinking. And I very much appreciate that because 99% of the time, my brain is just mush. So I just follow the numbers and it's like, oh, look, I've built this. And I love it. So the first one comes together super easy. And the second one, it's a little triangle shape. And same thing, it had numbers debossed in it. So it's like layer 1, 2, 3, 4, it's so easy. loves it. So assembled all my little flowers just like so. And it's just, this is another one of those things where it's like I've got all my die cut pieces. Everything was blended. Everything's sitting there. And then I can just literally just zone out and assemble. And then look at them. Aren't they pretty? Look at these pretty little flowers. And especially, you can especially notice it on the lighter ones. All that ink blending and how it just gives it so much more. So everything was assembled. Now I need to do my backgrounds. And I pulled out somewhat oldie but goodie. I've used this multiple times. I love it. This is the Essential Textures Gilded Marble Press Plate. So it's meant to be used in a better press. And I've used it as a press plate. I've used it as a hot foil plate. You can use it without ink and just do blind letterpress and just get the texture. But I pulled out my little better press and I put the plate on it. And then I've got a piece of the olive cardstock that I just taped to the clear plate. And then I'm inking up the better press plate with that oak moss fresh dye ink. I have been finding that the Altenew fresh dye inks work really nicely with the better press plates. I have been really happy with them. And you're not going to see, even regardless, on camera, that's the one thing with the better press. You can't see the texture. And even on a thinner cardstock like this, it's not super obvious, but in real life, like, you can feel it. I don't know. I have a thing for the better press. I love it. I love it. And it's basically idiot proof, which, again, this is why I like doing what I do. Anyway, so I press that onto the backgrounds. And then my card bases are, again, top folding A2 white note cards. And I stamped a sentiment from the Tranquil Greetings stamp set onto the insides of the cards with the swamp green ink. And then I'd kept a couple of the flower die cuts for the insides of the cards, along with a couple of the leaves. And I'm going to adhere the leaves to the inside, and then I'm going to adhere my die cut flower, and then I'm just going to trim off the excess that's hanging off the edge with my scissors so that there's plenty of space still to write on the inside of the card. So got that adhered into place, and then just using the edge of the card as my guide, I trim off that excess. And then I did the same thing on the second card base. And again, off camera, I kind of figured out my flower and leaf placement. And then I'm just basically going to do the same thing on this one. So I'm going to adhere that pressed background to my card base. And then got my little flowers and get those kind of clustered together. And then all my leaves and all of this I'm going to pop up with just thin foam squares. So it's going to give them just a smidge of dimension, but it's not going to create a ton of bulk because, again, especially the flowers. The leaves are fine, but the flowers have multiple layers, but they're also not super bulky because this cardstock is not super thick. So far I'm loving it. So adhered the leaves first. Just got those into place, just kind of tucked them in where they needed to go. And then put more foam squares behind these flowers. And I just kind of like tucked them in together so they fit together just like so. And then press that into place. And then I'm going to adhere that final leaf. And then this is when, of course, I decided to add splatter. This was the something that was missing. I kept it subtle though. I'm using the Yasutomo pale gold watercolor. I've used this in many videos. This is very subtle. It's not metallic, really. It dries quite matte. So it just depends on the kind of look you're going for. If you want like more like shiny gold splatter, that's when I go for my Gonzai Tombi Starry Colors palette that also I've shown in like a million videos. But I wanted to keep this a little more subtle. On these cards, it's extremely subtle, especially on the green. Golden green, that's just kind of how a lot of it just seems to go. So it's very subtle, but I'm okay with that. But then I was like, the mushroom cards also need splatter. So even though these cards were done, like the sentiments are in place, everything, I didn't like mask off the sentiments. I just took a risk. Because really, I was like, if I ruin the sentiments, I can like quickly stamp them and trim them out. Not a big deal. So added more splatter to these as well, just using my fan brush. And yeah, that watercolor, you just add a bit of water and then you just work it up really well with the brush. Talked about this before. I like to zone out when I'm swirling the watercolor. I'm like the kid making mud pies in the corner. Hand me a metallic watercolor and a brush and some water, and I'll probably keep myself amused for a good amount of time. Anyway, I also used the watercolor. I'd stamped the same sentiments onto white cardstock, but this time I used the swamp green ink, and then I just trimmed them out with my scissors. And then I took the watercolor and I was just edging these trimmed out sentiments with it. This is very subtle. Like, even in real life, it is very, very subtle. I just wanted to kind of finish those edges off. But again, if you want it more like shiny, Altenew also has a really pretty metallic watercolor set. It's on its way to me. So just stay tuned, because I'm sure I'm going to be doing a lot of splattering with that stuff too. But anyway, all the options. I have to have them. Anyway, those are my cards. Hope you guys enjoyed. Like I mentioned in the intro, I'll link to all the things. I'll have a link to this new release. I'll have the supply list with links to all the supplies I used, links to my socials, all the things. Those will be in the description box below the video. So if you just click to expand it, it'll all be there, and then you can just scroll through, find what you want, etc. As always, thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you all very soon in the next one. Bye. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in supporting me over on Patreon, the link to that is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye.